We are on chapter 43 of Called to Community. On the very joyful topic today of celebration, why celebration is such a vital and important component of the common life that we share together, that any community shares together. We should talk about some of the reasons why celebration is so important, which also the authors who contributed to this chapter reflect on. The first reason is simply the importance of human communion, the joyful relationships between people who live together that need to be sustained through celebration, right?
Right. Also, so that we don't just become an institution and it's all about work.
It's all about work or,
Yeah.
Goals or, the things that we often seem to occupy most of our lives. It's really important to stop and take time to acknowledge that we live together and that our spirits need to be nourished through joyful celebration.
Yeah, the three things that jumped out to me from this chapter was to avoid becoming like an institution, to also not take yourself too seriously because that can lead to stodginess and depression, and intentional celebration within community to just find reasons to celebrate the joy in God and in life is what can stimulate or revitalize purpose and then ultimately hope is what this chapter points out. So the connection between celebration and hope is something that came through for me, and it is so true when you live in community. The Old Testament has a lot to say about celebration and how to go about that, because it's not just like a superficial let's party, let's forget about what matters and
Eat, drink, and be merry.
Yeah. It's not so much that, it's more just like to express joy in the Lord, like the prophets of old did, like Jesus did himself, and to take time to share together with good food, good wine,
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly in the walk of Christian discipleship, which is a demanding walk. It demands renunciation. It demands turning away often from our fallen nature and to what God wants for us. And that can sometimes, it does demand a lot of us. And the tendency can sometimes then be to be putting a lot of effort into that, into remaining faithful. And that's important. I think it is important to have the hard work and the discipline of the common life that it demands from us. But even more so, we need these moments of joy, as Doreen said, generally these celebrations are going to happen around food and drink. There's a reason for that. We see examples of that in the Bible. I mean, Jesus himself was even accused of being a glutton and a wine bibber. But this just indicates that he also, with his disciples, needed those moments of refreshment. Now, the wedding of Cana is an obvious example. Another reason that I also think is important is the recognition of people, that we recognize the people in our lives, that we acknowledge them. And often this will happen on a birthday or an anniversary or an important life event, baptism, marriage. We recognize individual people and say to them, you matter. You're a special person. That's such an important thing that needs to happen, this acknowledgement, this validation of one another. You could say, like, do we really need that? Do we need that validation as people? Shouldn't we just be devoted selflessly to the cause or to, the community? I think you need it. I actually really believe you need those acknowledgments.
Yeah, and I think along with that, because that's so important, Richard Foster points out that another benefit of celebration is the ability to give us perspective, and how some of us could get wrapped up in a cause or, something that we're working really hard on within the community, for the community. But celebration can even the playing field and just make us see how, like, where we've had maybe an inflated view of ourselves, or laugh at each other, laugh with each other, just really get silly and enjoy being together. And how that characteristic of celebration actually begets more celebration, more joy, more laughter. And that's never a bad thing. So that's a really great point.
No, laughter is just an indispensable part of living together, because otherwise life can get heavy fast, especially if we start to look at our own failings or where we are not measuring up. And just to be able to laugh and believe in God's grace and God's mercy, and not take it all so seriously. Another thing I thought about was the role of celebration in reconciliation between people. I think this is most famously described in the parable of the prodigal son, where the son squanders his father's wealth and then comes back, and the father orders the fatted calf to be killed. Of course, his other son resents this, and resents the fuss being made, and the father says, "We had to celebrate." Yes. Because my son was lost and now he was found. He was dead, now he's alive. And similarly, in community, when rifts come between us, when misunderstandings and build up, and there are, it's important to confront those things and to have the difficult conversations, right? To seek forgiveness from one another. But I think even more important, is to celebrate when someone comes, when there's healing, when walls come down, when people are able to love each other again.
Or that can help bring walls down.
Mm-hmm.
So
we do sometimes get asked, because there are Christian denominations, Jehovah's Witnesses come to mind, who don't celebrate, for example, birthdays or Christmas or Easter. At the Bruderhof, we unapologetically celebrate all of these things. We celebrate Christmas with abandon, starting 100 days before Christmas. There's a lot of Christmas thing. We observe the whole Advent season. Easter as well, possibly a bit more of a solemn preparation time, but then Easter Sunday is a huge explosion of joy and in spring and a new life. Birthdays are a big deal, huge deal for some people. What else? Anniversaries.
Yeah, and just
there's basically not a week that goes by
also
without
just with the kids, school milestones or anything like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if you would ever visit the Bruderhof, be prepared to celebrate a lot. We really probably go overboard with it, but
yeah, better that way though.
Better that way. So that's about all for this chapter. Next week we'll meet back together to start part 4 of this book, Beyond the Community. So that's cool. With the next chapter is called Revolution by the civil rights activist and inspiration for our community, John Perkins. See you then.